Okay, so for today, we will be talking about plotting a linear graph. Now, when you see the word linear graph, in your head, you need to tell yourself you are going to be drawing a straight line graph. Okay, so a linear graph basically tells you it is a straight line graph. Okay, so that is number one. So, my first question over here is sketch the graph of this equation, this function over here, all right, this function over here. Now, how do I sketch it? All right, first thing you have to do is you have to extract information from this question over here. Now, number one, how do I know this is a linear graph? Because if you notice the x over here, there's no power. It is by itself. When it's by itself, it tells you that this is a linear graph. When x has a power of 2, x squared, that will be a quadratic graph, which I will be covering in our future video. Okay? So you see the x, there's no power, it is by itself. We know that this is a linear graph. So I know this is going to be a straight line. But the thing is, this equation over here does not give you all the information you need for the graph, all right? So what will be helpful is to rearrange this equation in the form of y equals to mx plus c, all right? It is better for you to rearrange this function, all right, or this equation into this form, because this form will tell you a lot of information about the graph, all right? Like first information we can get, all right, is this letter y over here. Now this y over here is very self-explanatory because we are talking about graph. So this will tell you the value of the y-axis, and x over here will be telling you the value of the x-axis, all right? But what do I want to focus on is the m and c over here. Now the m over here, all right, it stands for gradient, all right? It stands for a gradient. Now what's a gradient? Now how I would like to say it, all right? You use a simple word, a layman term to describe gradient. It will be the slope, all right, of the graph, all right? It will be the slope of the graph. Now let me just sketch out a few graphs here, all right, so you will understand better what is a gradient, all right? So let's start with a simple sketch over here. Okay, the first one over here, I have my x-axis and y-axis. Now let's just say my line falls over here. It is just basically a straight line, a horizontal line to the x-axis. So take a guess, because now I say that gradient is the slope of the graph, all right? It's a slope. So this blue line has a slope, all right? The answer is there is no slope. If there's no slope, this graph has a zero gradient. Okay, has a zero gradient because there's no slope, all right? Okay, but what if, all right? What if I were to add a slope to the graph right now? Okay, let's just say I am going to draw the red line from here to here, all right? You can see it's over here, like it's going up. There is a slope already, right? It's going upwards. You can see over here. So this one, we call this a positive gradient. It's called positive gradient. And finally here, if I were to sketch another simple graph, okay, if if I were to sketch another simple graph, and let's just say my line right now comes from like this, okay? So you can see there is a slope as well, but this time is going downwards, all right, going downwards. So we call this a negative gradient. Okay, all right. So I hope that this tree diagram will give you understand, well, will help you understand of how gradient looks like. It's basically the slope of the graph, of the line graph. All right, a slope of the line graph. I think I should put it the line graph so you can understand better. Now, but you might notice over here, I mentioned here positive and negative. Now, how do you remember this? Now, I have a simple way of remembering this. I use the concept of number line. Now, when we talk about number line, we will always start from the left to right? Correct or not? From 0, example 0, 1, 2, 3. So I will always look at the graph. I will always look at the left-hand side. Okay, my left-hand side, and this over here is my starting position. And the right-hand side, the tip is going to be my ending position. Now, if you notice over here, it is going upwards, correct or not? It's as if I am hiking up the mountain, all right? I'm hiking up the mountain. So that will be a positive gradient, okay? Whereas over here, okay, the left side is going to be my start. The right side is going to be my end. You can see over here, I'm going downhill. I'm going downhill. It's like I'm descending the mountain. So if I'm descending, I'm going down, that will be a negative gradient. All right. Now that is how I remember my gradients. Okay. Now the next one is the letter C over here. Now the letter C over here, that's going to be very important. This letter C over here tells you the y-intercept. Now, what does the y-intercept means? Basically, to put it in a simple way, basically it means where the lines cuts through the y-axis, all right? Okay, it's where the line cuts through. Okay, the y-axis. Okay, so that is what it means by y-intercept. All right, now that's gradient. Now over here, I will talk about the y-intercept. Now again, I will just going to draw a simple graph. All right, let's just sketch out. Just understand first before we start sketching for our question. So let's just say I have, a line that looks something like this. Now we can identify this as a positive gradient, right? It's going up. So take a note at this part over here. Now this part is where the line cuts through the y-axis. That is the y-intercept. Now in this case, because it cuts on the positive side of the y-axis, so we know this is going to be the positive y-intercept, all right? It's going to be the positive y-intercept. All right, and very similarly, if I can just sketch out my graph very quickly over here. And if I were to draw a line that looks something like this, okay? You can see that this is a negative gradient, it's going downwards. And this part is going to be the y-intercept. Okay, so this is going to be a negative y-intercept. Okay, now that is the main information we can get from the graph, from this equation over here. Now let's work out all this information and let's try to do something about this. Now I want to sketch this graph, but I would like to know what's my gradient and what's my y-intercept. By having these two information, the gradient and the y-intercept, you will be able to know how the graph looks like. So let's start by arranging this by making y the subject. So what do I have here right now? I have 2x plus 3y equals to 12. Okay, let's work this out. So 3y is going to equals to negative 2x plus 12, right? Okay, and then I should get y is going to equals to negative 2x plus 12, and everything over here it's going to over 3. And we can further simplify this, all right? And I should get negative 2 over 3x, and then I should have plus 4 over here, okay? Now, this equation is already in this form over here. I can get a lot of information over here. Number one is this one. Any values, all right? Any value behind the x, that is going to be the value of m, which is the gradient. And this over here, that's going to be the 4. This part is going to tell you the value of c, that is going to be the y-intercept. And this information is enough to help you to sketch the graph. So what can I do over here? So I know it's a negative gradient, all right? Disregard the fraction. All we need to know is either it's positive or negative. So we know it's a negative gradient, so the slope is coming downwards. And as it comes downwards, it should cut through 4, positive 4 at the y-axis. So if I were to sketch the answer out, let's just say over here. Okay, so that is going to be my x. This is going to be my y. And if we were to work this out, you will notice that the line will go through like this. All right, where this part over here, the y-intercept is going to be 4. All right, and that is how we sketch the graph. All right, now remember, in this form we can't get the information, but you can always rearrange it to y equals to mx plus c to extract out all this information, and you will get your sketch over here. All right, and that is how you use the equation to sketch your graph.